Good afternoon, everyone. At the outset, I want to thank ISBC for giving me this opportunity to share some of my ideas with all of you. Even though on the abstract booklet, the topic is Pranayam, a companion for healthy aging, during the course of my experiment on myself, I realized that life what is yoga. As you can see, the title has a question mark in the end. There's not a full stop, so that's a question that I'm investigating as of now. So it's an open-ended question. So starting off with that. So yeah, the topic is yoga companion for healthy aging. But a natural question arises: what after all is aging? Like, what does aging really mean? And there are different schools of thoughts when it comes to aging. So one perspective could be: is it absence of diseases or no stress or tension, intact constant capacities, and cognitive ability to live our life independently as we are aging, and better emotional regulation. So is it healthy aging about all of this, or do we need a scientific general definition of healthy aging? Or instead, we need to ask ourselves what healthy aging means to me. We need to dig inside of ourselves to understand what healthy aging, means to me and what are its connotations, its subjective understanding in our own lives. So that becomes an important question before we even investigate yoga as a companion for healthy aging. So having understood that, according to my understanding, healthy aging relates to regulating our exercise and diet choices as per our body. So over the course of our lifestyle, of our life goals, our body is changing, and if we can understand our body, change our exercise and diet accordingly, that could also be a part of healthy aging. Another view to look at healthy aging would be, a greater physical and mental resilience to cope up with changes linked to aging. Other thing could be prioritizing actions towards health as we age, we are more prone to developing certain kind of diseases. So if we can, sort of to prioritize our choices, that could also be healthy aging. And lastly, it can also be learning to be more present as we go inside, the trajectory of our aging. So personally, I feel that minimizing the health-related burdens that aging can cause to us and our loved ones, summarizes aging and healthy aging is very much a personal responsibility. Some of you may be shocked and to read that and might think that I thought it was my doctor's responsibility, but it's very much a personal responsibility. So having understood about healthy aging part of that, now the question arises, okay, then what's the role of yoga in healthy aging? Why should we even bother about yoga and healthy aging? But before that, it's important to understand what is yoga. A very mechanical understanding of yoga would be a program which consists of physical exercises and breathing exercises. This is how it's understood in contemporary world, but yoga is much more beyond that. We can discuss what it is in the break time. But just for the sake of the presentation, it is considered as a program of asanas and pranayams, breathing exercises. The type of asanas can be static, they can be even dynamic. So in static, you actually hold the posture. So if I'm using this, I'm holding this is a static asana. But if I'm doing sun salutations, which is called as Surya Namaskar, that would be more dynamic because your body is engaging and all that. Then it comes question, what is pranayam? Most people confuse pran as breathing, but breathing is the external manifestation of the prana. So think of it in terms like what makes flower bloom. So that is something which is closer to what we can call prana. So a bit more on prana. So how is it related to brain and all that? So if you can just do a small experiment right now, if you observe, you are not breathing from both the nostrils at the same time. So if you can just put your finger beneath your nose and then you can actually identify which nostril is active. So at one point of time, in the daytime, mostly the right nostril is active. As we are retiring in the evening, it's the left nostril that's active. So I know this is directly connected to our brain. So if we have this diagram and then we segregate it into right and left, and so the left nostril is actually connected to the right part of the brain, and the right nostril is connected to the left part of the brain. Okay, so in English terms, we have called it parasympathetic and sympathetic system. In Hindi, we call it Ida and Pingala Nadu. That's Hindi word in yogic terms. So generally, when these systems are balanced, it is considered to be good health. So pranayama helps us in balancing these two, parts of autonomic nervous systems. And yogic breathing practice actually really regulates the flow of the pran through these nostrils. So sort of pranayam purifies the energy channels in our body. Energy channels don't have a physical manifestation, but there are certain kind of photographies that can actually picturize those channels inside of our body. So it's generally understood that when there are blockages inside of these energy channels, it manifests into somatic and mental kind of diseases. So breathing practices actually restore the energy. So generally, a very pristine view of disease is that your body speaks to yourself. So when there is an imbalance in your body, and the body is working harder to balance that imbalance, but after some time, it sort of gives up, and that's when it manifests clinically as a certain kind of disease. So pranayam helps us with restoring the energy balance. So now that we understand about healthy aging, we have somewhat understanding of yoga and pranayam. What's the relationship between yoga and healthy aging? So I mean, the literature is replete with evidence that yoga has been found useful in both preventing, managing, and curative care and palliative care in lots of chronic diseases. And I'm sure personally also, if any of you have experience, practice yoga for some point of time regularly, you might also have faced some kind of positive differences in yourself. So now that we talk about yoga on aging, the obvious scientific question arises: how do you measure it? There has to be an objective measure. So one of the measures that I found out in the literature review was using HRV. So HRV is heart rate variability. So how many of you are familiar with this term heart rate variability? So that I can explain that. Could you please take your hands? Okay, thank you. So you see, heart rate variability is the difference in the consecutive heartbeats that your heart is beating. So the time between each consecutive heartbeat is not a constant. So a human heart is not a metronome. So the time tends to differ. So in this diagram, you can see that this is the QRS simplex and this NN interval, the RR interval, this is the time difference. So the variance, so statistical word would be the variance between these different time intervals. That is called as heart rate variability. So heart rate variability is actually an indicator of sympathetic system and parasympathetic system and the balance between them. So the rule of the thumb is that HRV can be considered as a sign of fitness because it indicates the balance between the parasympathetic and sympathetic nervous system. And when there is a prolonged autonomic imbalance, that's when we can say, okay, our body is not actually performing as it's expected to be. So for the sake of the study, HRV was used to identify what is the impact of yogic practices on the subject, which is me. Yeah. So the prior evidence states that HRV and yoga are quite related. Yoga has been found to, tilt the balance towards parasympathetic nervous system. See, sympathetic nervous system is when you are in a fight mode. So, for example, your professor shouts at you, and your immediate decision is to walk out of the room or to answer him or her back. So that would be a sympathetic response. A parasympathetic response would be when you are in a rest and digestive state, so you are more relaxed state. Okay, so yoga has been found to improve the parasympathetic predominance in the body, and it has also been useful in the cancer patients. The amount of literature review is quite less. Nevertheless, it does present a picture, a very convincing picture indeed, that yoga benefits the HRV. And when it comes to aging, yoga has been found to be increasingly useful in improving the attention, alertness, and short-term memory after 3 months among elderlies in 35 to 55-year-old, and also improve dexterity capacity. So now we know about yoga, pranayam, and now we also know that we are using HRV. Okay, so there are certain kind of HRV measures that I have used in the study. So HRV is essentially a signal. It's continuous signal. So obviously it can be analyzed in time domain or frequency domain. So in time domain, generally these two are considered most frequently used, which is the root mean square of successive differences. So the successive differences between the time intervals and their mean and then its square root, and standard deviation of normal intervals. So it's normal the standard deviation of the time intervals. So while RNS60 reflects the parasympathetic, STNN reflects both the balance, but STNN is generally used in 24 hours context. That means when you're measuring your HRV for 24 hours, then STNN becomes a more reliable measure. Average NN is not much used, but I've just mentioned it. In frequency domain, low frequency, high frequency have been found to be correlated with time domain features. So generally, high frequency is considered to be an index of parasympathetic system. So higher proportion of high frequency in our HRV, we are moving towards the parasympathetic balance. So now that we know about what the context of this talk is and what is the objective measure that has been used, talking about the experimental setup. So I did an experiment on myself for about 2 months, and I recorded my HRV before the yoga session and after the yoga session in the supine position, because HRV is so sensitive. So you got to maintain a particular position when you are measuring it. The recording time was 63 minutes. It's important because the accuracy of HRV data that is gathered is highly dependent on the time. But research has shown that 1 minute is okay. Better 2 minutes and 5 minutes, but because this is a short experiment, 1 minute seems to do the job. A yogic session consisted of practices of asanas and pranayam, and that brings me to why I changed the topic to yoga. Because pranayams should not be done just like that. You need to open up your body. The body gets open up only when you are doing asanas. So then your body is actually prepared to do the breathing exercises and all that. So to gather the HRV data, I use HRV for training app. This is a mobile app generally used in sports performances and all. So it measures your HRV. I can show you the app in the break time. So generally it uses camera sensor to sense the HRV. So normally in clinical settings you would use ECG for measuring your HRV, right? But there is evidence that says that there is a very good correlation between HRV measures from ECG, PPG, and H7. H7 is the polar strap that actually sports people tie to their chest, and that measures their HRV. So this is the basis of why HRV app, which uses camera sensor, is a good way to measure HRV. So now coming to the analysis, these are the matrices that I have used. I will walk you through the analysis. Please stop me anytime it's not clear to you. So the basic analysis scheme is what was the HRV before the yoga session and what was it after it. And not only that, but also differences are important to measure as compared to the duration of practice. So there will be a scatter plot also. And I will also discuss some of the specific cases from the experiment history, which will include the qualitative data, because numbers itself cannot tell the complete story. Okay, so now we look at the heart rate. So this sun at the corner says it was a morning data. So this session was done in morning. So even though I tried to gather data for 2 months, but intermittently I was able to take it for 28 days throughout the period of 2 months. So as you can see that the heart rate tends to, it's lower after yoga as compared to before yoga. So heart rate has definitely, gone down after the yogic practice. So generally because we are more calm and composed, so, breathing has an impact on heart rate as well. So heart rate seem to be down. Similarly, post yoga AVNN, so average NN interval. So imagine NN intervals as the time. Okay, so higher amount of time. So imagine it like this: if your heart is beating faster, naturally the time between each consecutive heartbeat would be less, right? And as a result of which the standard deviation and all these factors will be less. So average NN would be less. So after the yoga session, the time between each NN intervals is actually increased. So that means our system is moving more towards the parasympathetic nervous system. And this was also a session done in morning. Now, generally STNN and RMSST are used. And I know that this data actually looks like a signal. But that's the thing with HRV, that 1 month and 2 months data is also not sufficient. You need to observe it over a long period of time, let's say 6 or 8 months, and that's why this is an ongoing study. But nevertheless, if you notice that there are days in which my HRV has not really changed much. After yoga, it has actually decreased, and sometimes it has increased. So I will also discuss what would be the attributable factor for why it has decreased. Similarly, RMSST, which is the root mean square of successive differences, it should be high after yoga. Okay, so there are cases wherein there is increases, but there are also cases where there are decreases. This is not to feel something disheartening about, but it just tells you that there is something that you have not been looking at, because it's again just the numbers don't always tell the complete story. So if I have to discuss this, so if you look at this chunk, in this chunk, my after yoga RMSST, which is supposed to be higher, is actually lower. So the reason is that on day 2, day 3, 3, 4. So when I started the practice, I forgot my dinner on day 1 and day 2, and it sort of reflected in my next day practices. So my body was already under stress because I did not have dinner and all that. And on the top of that, I pushed it to do some exercise and breathing exercises. So that's why it sort of reflected in that. So that's what I think would be the reason, because the data belongs to me. So that's what I'm able to defend the lower values because of that. Similarly, on around day 21, 22, 23, 24, I was traveling to my home for a festival, Diwali. So traveling also has pressure on your HRV and all that. So because of that, and also I was going through some emotional stress during that time. But because it's an experiment on me, I need data, I have to give a talk, so I have to gather data. And so then I continued with the practice. And then again, it was clear in the matrices that the value has decreased. So that is how I explain the lower values after yoga. Post yoga, high frequency should be high, and again, I understand this looks noisy, but after 6 and 8 months, there would be some pattern emerging. But episodically, if you look at each of the days, there is some story that can be gathered, and when maybe it is not as expected, there is always a reason behind that. Now coming to the evening session. So this clip art here shows evening session. So hopefully now it is a bit more clear to you that after yoga, STNN is higher. It should be higher. And I wonder why my yogic practices in the evening much better than the morning practices. And I sat with that and I realized that when we are starting the day, we want to do some sessions in the morning. But there is also in the back of the mind, okay, this is a task I have to accomplish for the day, and these are the things I have to do. So it's very difficult to be present during that practice. But when after work we come back to our home, we sit in the evening, and mostly dinner is the thing that we look forward to, so we can sort of relax. And when that we do that practices, so somehow the essentially this is what I saw, that even though in evening I don't have much data because of there are many things that keep on happening in evenings, but whenever I got time, I did the practice just to see. And here actually it's better for you to visualize that after yoga, STNN is higher than before yoga. Sort of expected. And this is the outlier. I don't know why it is shorter, but I think this is an outlier. Similarly, for RMSST also, you can see that there is some neat delineation that after yoga, RMSST is a bit more than before yoga, RMSST. So having understood that high and low is not sufficient, we should also understand what is the magnitude of the difference. So in this, I tried to plot an XY plot of STNN difference versus the duration of practice. So the red dot means the difference is less than 0, which is negative, and black means it's different. So you can see that there is roughly a positive correlation with as the duration of practice is increasing with the STNN differences. So and the weighted mean difference is 14.29. So it generally shows that if you increase the practice session duration, STNN difference would be high. But I also feel there is a contradiction in that because the quality of practice matters as well. So similarly for RMSST, the correlation was found much better than STNN. And again, but it doesn't mean that you just keep on doing yoga for 2 hours, 3 hours, 4 hours. It also matters that the quality and the amount of presence you are bringing. But I'm sure this is a data of only 28 to 30 days. If I continue this practice for a long time, I'm expecting there might be plateau effects. So I'll have to continue the experiment to see that. This is the difference in evening. In evenings, again, as you see, there are hardly negative differences. There are always positive differences. And this again seems like an outlier. And I remove it. The correlation is almost there is no correlation at all. So, okay, this maths and data analysis is all fine, but what's the implication of all this? What does all this mean to me in real life? So, over the course of 2 months, I realized that I had a greater awareness of my body and circadian rhythm. And because I was much more aware of what is happening inside of my body, because I was engaging with my body, I was able to take better decisions, lead to sleep, exercise, nutrition, and emotional regulation. See, these are the decisions we always want to take better at. So we read books to do better that. But I think the idea is that as within, so change always comes from within. And when you work in consonance with your body, in alignment with your body, so that's what I actually experienced throughout these 2 months of my study. So, but however, there are some caveats, which I also felt that there were certain situations when I'm feeling good, but the numbers is not reflecting that. And that would again give me stress. Okay, I'm feeling good, but what my numbers are not, why it's not reflecting that. So then I realized that one metric is not sufficient to tell the complete story. So you have to look at the entire set of variables that are generated. So this is the chunk of 2 of the dates. This is 16th October. So as you can see, the last the HRP has decreased because there was an emotional stress. Okay, and it is also reflected in the high frequency, which has reduced. It is also reflected in RMS60, which has reduced, and also in HTNM. However, on the other case, on 18th of October, my HRP is actually increased. But my comment is that my night sleep was not good. And it is actually reflected in high frequency that it was 0.21 when I started to practice at 8 o'clock in the morning. And it was 0.08 at 9:16 when I finished off the practice. So you see the idea, basic idea I'm trying to tell you is that it's not very scientific to focus on just one metric when you're trying to complete or identify a particular story. So context is very important because there are always times when numbers don't always tell you what you're feeling. So then you need to go deeper into those numbers. So lastly, I want to share some personal lessons. Because I was the subject, because I was the one who was presenting data and gathering data, there was some ethical dilemmas. I faced that even when there are certain situations involved, and even if I have an agenda or I don't have an agenda, my data gathering practice should be independent of that. So I made sure I followed that. Then sometimes we can be so much in the frenzy of numbers that I was not sure if I'm in danger or I'm just getting paranoid about we are so data focused these days that we are sort of diverse from our own selves. So that was something I faced. And a blind trust on numbers is never a good idea. You should always look at it in the context. There were data sync errors sometimes. Once I got a really good data budget, it could not get synced, and I was upset. But then I realized that this is part of the process. Our traditional understanding of exercise is running on the wheel. Okay, if you are not exhausted, if you are not running, we are not exercising. This activity actually pushed me to look at exercise in a different way and really tested my patience. And I'm not sure if I'm there yet.
You are making me feeling really guilty. 3-4 days I'm drinking alcohol, I can't exercise. I want to go right away to it. You're transferring your beat. Many thanks for your honesty.
So other lesson was the body alignment based decisions. See, you have to be aligned to your body to understand the decisions it wants to take. Knowing your body is actually the trajectory to make better decisions and take. And then there is a tendency to overdo it. I have to give a talk, I have to gather data, I have to analyze data. So I was actually overdoing it in morning and evening, and then I actually developed stiffness in my back. And then I had to go to physiotherapist, and then I was telling him, I'm doing yoga every day. Why have I developed stiffness in my back? And maybe I'm doing too much of downward dog and all that. So that's when I realized that even in yoga there is something called as overdoing it. So balance is always important. And lastly, I found this is a very dark example, but I think it conveys the point. I'm not sure if you're able to see the text, is it? So the lady says it's for a lot, and the guy is saying it depends on the context. And then the guy says if it's $4, it doesn't matter much, but if it's 4 murders, it's quite a lot. So the context is always more important. So the next steps in this study would be this is an ongoing experiment for my personal interest. And I wanted to understand HRV, so I thought, okay, why not use yoga as a stepping stone to understand HRV. So I plan to gather more data for 6 to 8 months, and I really want to identify if there is a hierarchy in HRV matrices with respect to their real world applicability. Of course, as with any work, there are limitations. HRV is very, very sensitive. So, it changes based on your mindset, based on the quality of air you're breathing, based on your mood. So, you have to be careful about that. The duration of sessions was irregular, but I think that just mimics human behavior. Nobody just works for 60 hours. 60 minutes every day. There is bound to be variance in that. I was not very regular in journaling my pre and post yoga session talking of patients. So that would have given me much better data, but then I would try to do it better next time as I experiment to see. Data points are few because this is not a very experiment. The literature review can be improved, and lastly, there is no control, so I don't have anyone to control. But in this one, I think I can also be the control. That's how I look at it. And these are the references. Thank you so much. Also, the talk that I presented looks at aging in one perspective. If you know Carl Jung, this is psychoanalysis, is a very, very beautiful perspective on aging. I strongly recommend all of you to read it. Thank you so much.